Chapter 9. Breaking Bread. Order up! A cook rang the service bell as a plate slid through the kitchen window, burgers and fries steaming under a heat lamp. Wallace and Resin stepped into the noisy diner. Neither had said a word since leaving the park. Resin, quiet, caught between confusion and sheer exhaustion. Wallace? He just wasn't ready to start this particular conversation. Not on an empty stomach. They slid into a booth along the wall. The diner was busy. Silverware clinking, orders being shouted over the low hum of conversation. An old jukebox in the corner crackled through a song no one was really listening to, its lights flickering against worn vinyl seats and a row of stools lined with half-finished plates. One poor waitress moved like she was three people stitched together by caffeine and just enough patience to get through the shift. "I'll be right with you, hun," she called over her shoulder, balancing 5 plates and a pitcher of sweet tea without breaking stride. She dropped the plates at another table, pivoted, and was already halfway back to the kitchen before the thank you landed. Resin picked up the laminated menu and gave it a half-hearted glance. He was definitely hungry, but nothing stood out. Not because nothing sounded good, but because his head was still a mess. Something greasy and fried would help. It usually did. Wallace wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at Resin. Not obvious, of course. Just enough to watch without being caught. How did a kid like this outrun someone like Moran? Wallace wasn't the type to be taken by surprise, much less confused, but this didn't add up. The kid looked ordinary. Lean, scrappy, sharp maybe, but still just a kid. Wallace had seen plenty in his lifetime, things most would never believe. But this shouldn't have been possible. So how the hell did he... "Are you going to say something, or just keep staring at me like I'm a science project?" Resin said, not looking up. That shattered Wallace's train of thought like a rock through glass. Wallace shifted in his seat, a small adjustment, quick and quiet. Not a flinch, but close, not like him. "You've been looking at me like I belong in some kind of freak show," Resin said, voice low, steady, not angry, just done waiting. "But I'm not the one who sprouted claws and chased somebody up a tree in the middle of the park." He leaned in. "So how about we start there?" What the hell was that? Wallace exhaled through his nose, steadying himself and refocused. "Okay, well, I'm sure you've heard the stories about... What can I get you boys to drink?" The waitress appeared like a lifeline, cutting him off just as he started. "Oh, yes, ma'am," Wallace said, a flicker of relief in his voice. "I'll have a Coke." "I guess I'll take a coffee. Black, please," Resin said. The waitress raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you a little young for coffee?" "Probably. But here we are. This'll be the 3rd cup today. I'll be fine." "I guess coffee's cheaper than therapy, sugar." "All right then. 1 Coke, 1 coffee. Be right back." She scooted off toward the kitchen, pen already scribbling. Resin looked back at Wallace. "You were saying?" He gave him no room to dodge. Wallace tried anyway. "Let's start here. My name's Evan Wallace. I'm what's known as a warden for Savannah." "A warden? Like for a prison?" Resin asked. "No, well, yes, but not that... You telling me that guy was some kind of escaped inmate or something?" "No. Slow down a second, kid. Let me explain." Wallace paused, sizing him up. "Actually, before I go on, What's your name? You can call me Resin. And how do you know Lewis Arkwright? Wallace asked. Resin started laughing. What, Lou's mixed up in this too? He pulled himself back together. How do I know Louis? Shit. We crossed paths about a year ago. Let's just say he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I wasn't. Been stuck with him ever since. Yep, that unfortunately sounds like him, Wallace said, giving a small nod and a slight roll of his eyes. He's an interesting individual. No, go ahead. You can say it. He's a dumbass. They both got a small kick out of that. Just enough. Resin leaned back slightly. And how do you know Louis? I've known him since the day he was born. His father and I, his voice steady, deliberate. Let's just say we work in the same field. Wallace rested his hands on the table. Okay. Resin didn't hide the suspicion in his tone. Here y'all go. The waitress slid the drinks onto the table with a practiced hand. 1 Coke and 1 coffee, black. You boys ready to order? Yes, ma'am. I'll have the BLT, please. Wallace said, polite as ever. Good choice. And you, hun? Resin glanced back down at the menu, scanning for something cheap but filling. I think I'll get... Wallace cut in, catching the hesitation. Go ahead. Get whatever you want. Resin looked up, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't used to kindness. Ironically, he'd rather steal than accept charity. But this didn't feel like a handout. It felt like respect. I'll have what he's having, with a side of fries. Wallace cleared his throat, just once, and gave Resin a quiet look. Resin blinked, realizing what he'd forgotten. Please, he said, and thank you. The waitress gave a quick smile. 2 BLTs coming up, she called back, already halfway to the kitchen. Wallace took a slow sip of his drink, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, as he gathered his thoughts. All right, he said, setting the glass down. Now that that's out of the way, let's see how to start this. He paused, not for effect, but because he genuinely wasn't sure how to explain it. He's never talked about his profession with someone from the outside before. You've heard the old stories? Wallace said finally. Wolfman, Dracula, all those movies, all those books. Well, those stories came from somewhere. Resin raised an eyebrow. What? You telling me the old man who chased me through Forsyth Park was the Wolf Man? Wallace smirked, just barely. No, the Wolf Man was just a movie. He paused. But they weren't too far off. Resin leaned in, voice low. What I saw, his eyes, his hands. You really expect me to believe that was just a guy with some kind of skin condition? Wallace shook his head. No, I don't. He let the air settle for a moment, then added, a little more carefully. We call his kind Lycans. They're not so different from me and you, at least most of the time. Hold up. They? He's not the only one? Resin looked at Wallace like he was waiting for a punchline. There's more things like that out there? Wallace met his eyes. Not to come down on you like a ton of bricks, but... He paused, voice steady. You wouldn't believe how much more. So, you're telling me there's monsters just waltzing around Savannah, living in fancy homes in the historic district? He gave Wallace a look like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke or a mental breakdown. No, Well, yes, but not just here. Wallace didn't blink. Most of them prefer cities. Doesn't matter if it's Savannah or Seattle. Places like this make it easier to blend in. And most of them are just living the best lives they can. They keep to themselves, surviving. The American dream, same as anyone else. Resin ran a hand over his face, trying to make sense of it all. And we just live around all this like it's normal, like nobody notices there's monsters on the loose. Please don't call them that. And, well, yes. This thing hunted me down like a wolf going after a rabbit in the middle of the damn day. What is that if not a... Wallace interrupted him mid-sentence. That word, monster, it's easy to throw around when you're scared. Wallace's voice stayed calm, but there was something heavier underneath it now. But most of the ones I deal with, they're just trying to live. Quiet. Just out there, living a normal life. They have families, jobs. Some are even pillars of our community. You start calling everything that looks or acts a little different a monster, and before long... He let the thought hang. Before long what? Resin asked. You end up hunting things that were never dangerous to begin with. I just don't see how this is even possible. These other things are out there, and nobody knows. Most people don't notice what they don't know. It's easier to explain away the strange than accept it's real. He took a slow sip of his Coke. And the ones who do know, some of us work behind the curtain to keep things from falling apart. Resin gave him a look. So what are you then? Savannah's paranormal patrol officer? Wallace let out a low breath, somewhere between amusement and exhaustion. Not far off. Officially, I'm a warden. I keep track of certain residents and goings-on in the area. Wallace leaned forward just slightly. The ones who keep to themselves? No problem. But when someone steps out of line, I make sure they don't do it again. 2 BLTs and a side of fries, the waitress said, sliding the plates onto the table. You want ketchup, hun? Resin blinked, completely thrown. No, I don't believe this. The waitress froze mid-reach. Okay. No ketchup, then. Wait, no, sorry, yes. Yes to the ketchup. Just not what I meant. He exhaled hard and ran a hand through his hair. Forget it. Wallace just sipped his Coke like nothing unusual had happened. He gonna be okay? The waitress asked, eyeing Resin. He'll be fine. Thank you. Go ahead and bring the check. She turned back toward the kitchen, muttering as she went. Told that kid he didn't need no damn coffee. Resin didn't say anything. He didn't even move at first. The house, the dagger, a monster in the park, and now this, creatures living next door like it was normal. What's next? He threw his elbows on the table and buried his face in his hands. Wallace picked up his sandwich. Eat something, he said, already mid-bite. You'll feel better. Resin didn't answer. He just sat there for a moment, elbows on the table, hands over his eyes. Then he just stood up, slow, quiet, didn't say a word. He stepped towards the front. The bell above the door jingled once, and that was it. Wallace watched him shove the door open and disappear into the sunlight. Well, he muttered, That went about how I expected. He gave the waitress a polite wave. "Ma'am, could I get a to-go box, please? Thank you kindly." He took another bite of his sandwich, shook his head, thought to himself, and smirked. Teenagers.